Today's guest on the Sex and Space podcast is the wonderful Susie Orbach. Susie Orbach, if you're unfamiliar with the name, is the British psychoanalyst, psychotherapist, writer and social critic who hit the world with the book Fat as a Feminist Issue. It's an important examination of the obsession that we have with food and body image. And written over 40 years ago, it still remains hyper-relevant to this day. Fast forward to 2009 and Susie followed up on this idea with the book Bodies. In this book, she argues that the way that we view our bodies has become synonymous with the way that we view ourselves. Our body becomes the way that we measure our self-worth. And she suggests in this book ways that we might be able to heal from this kind of messaging. In the podcast, Susie spoke with Jane about this amazing body of work and three main themes emerged. The development of feminism and the way our perception of it has changed over time, our struggle as humans to be both connected and autonomous, and the way in which the food and beauty industries profit so significantly from body insecurity. Let's jump in.
So, Susie Orbach, welcome. Honoured to have you.
Thank you.
This is amazing. I want to actually start with a word that was tricky to use when you started, and now we find ourselves in a situation where it's tricky sometimes to use again. Where do you see we're at with feminism?
Well, exactly so. It was an embarrassment to use it in public space outside of the women's liberation movement when I was a youngster. And, one would be teased or criticized for being that way.
Yeah.
And accused, and I use the word accused because I think it's apt, accused of being a lesbian. Like when Louise Eichenbaum and I would go and give talks, people thought that they were somehow getting something over us by telling us that we were lesbians. So feminism melded into, women only like women and sexually, as opposed to, our response was, so what? I mean, in fact, we were both heterosexual. But I think the words come in and out during many periods, and it's been contested again. Because although for my generation, we thought feminism was a critique of patriarchy and shouldn't be excluding anybody, it should be a lens for looking at the problematic of gender, the problematic of femininity and masculinity, the rigidity of those things, the way in which the world was organized. It's come back again because we're living in a period where identity politics, feeling understood in terms of certain categories, has then thrown feminism as though feminism was simply about women rather than a view about social change and a view about patriarchy and something that anybody could enter into.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting to consider whether men felt there was space for them back when we were having those conversations.
Well, I think in my day, we had a critique, let's say, of work. It wasn't just our critique. I mean, the New Left had a critique of work. Pete Seeger had Little Boxes. He had a song about how we were all units. And when women were saying we wanted to enter the workforce, we didn't want the workforce. We didn't want to be the person who had to be bankers and had to put their jackets on the back of the chair and be there for 20 hours a day. We were saying that we needed a rethink on labor processes. What constitutes labor? Does women's emotional labor in the home constitute, or at work, does that constitute work? Do any of us really want to be in our workplaces for all of that time? So I think men were very interested in that. Okay, not every man was prepared to do childcare or creches or whatever, but I think there was an appreciation before the Thatcher-Reagan era, that work was something that maybe we should have meaning. Maybe it should be something that was engaging but not a theft of life. It should be a plus in life.
And that feels like it's back in as a source of debate now. But having lived through being kind of one of the women who went to work, had the children, did everything, and kind of that, we lost sight of that along the way somewhere, I think.
Well, did we lose sight, or it was just so impossible because we didn't, I don't know, but we didn't live in cultures where there was really good childcare, where there were really progressive employers. And we also lived with the sort of ideologies of we have to do it all and we have to do it right, and we have to be, there was all the whole kind of ideology of perfection, as opposed to life is a series of trying to do what feels good enough, frankly.
Yeah, yeah. I think your point, with the more, I guess, that feminism as an interrogation of culture and its systems was the bit that I guess women like me lost, because we kind of forgot that it was the systems that were the issue as we went into them.
Well, I think
And
that was
yeah,
definitely, I don't know about where you're situated, but in London, in New York, and North America and England, everything got reprivatized. I mean, that was the Thatcher Reagan deal. The reason I'm mentioning it is because I think it was a real watershed of the destruction of civil society and the notion that we were engaging as people and trying to work things out. I think it was then that, okay, whatever was going on was your problem, yours to figure out. So we lost it because there was this ideological carapace of individual achievement. The individual is all that matters.
yeah, yeah.
And
No,
that
and
was in service of smashing state provision, but it was also ideological in terms of trying to break people's reliance on each other and put them in, I think, more into competition with each other.
yes, I think radical individualism, definitely. Yeah, and growing up as English, I think in a world where, and then moving to the other side of the world,
Yeah.
growing up in a world where there was no concept of permission for, stepping outside of the boxes. Even pre that individualistic space, women had a place and a box. So it was quite interesting to move to the colonies, as were described back then, and discover childcare existed. And
Did,
there were some systems. It was
yeah.
interesting.
Yes. And where did you move to first?
I went to Auckland in New Zealand.
Yeah, but you see, when I went there to visit, I thought it was incredibly progressive coming from the UK.
Yeah, same. And then I went home and realized that I was going nowhere there, so I came back again. And, I think it was very progressive once upon a time. It's maybe not so much now. But it was interesting to be somewhere where there were some systems to support women's movement into workplace, but we still got lost. And I think that kind of model of how we do business and individualism and the capitalist model are all the things that we weren't really challenging at the time. It was more, I can do this job. Breaking out was kind of one box into another, maybe.
Yeah, see, I think there was something important about the individual that needed to be understood. It wasn't that that we were against the notion of self-expression, but self-expression seems to me has to occur inside of a community of interest rather than in terms of smashing the community of interest.
And so, where do you see in this world we're in today the kind of role and progression for feminism as it is now versus back then?
I don't really know that I've got my fingers on the pulse in the same way. The thing that's, because I work as a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, I hear the inside as well as the outside of people's experience, cross-gender and non-binary people. And I think that some of the themes are very problematic for people, but I don't know where we actually are situated. I think we're being offered silos of interest and not communication, if you like. That doesn't mean people don't long for it. That's why they find communities of interest online. But I'm not sure that I can give an account of where feminism is and where that search to express those values is, because I think I'm not sure I can. Let me just put it that way.
Is it about fragmentation?
I think it is about fragmentation, and it's that we forget that people have contributions to make wherever they come from, and people can understand each other if they bother to listen and share wherever they come from. And we don't really have, we have polarization and fragmentation and definitions that get narrower and narrower. And they're all those identities that we require or find for ourselves or feel understood by are very useful. But if they don't join up with other communities, they're I think quite damaging.
We can't find any commonality or
Correct.
connection. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I've always thought that, and this is an idealization of New Zealand, that you had a bigger conversation going on. And every time I went there, and I think that was probably pre-COVID, but I know there'd been a lot of fracturing, but it did feel like everybody knew somebody and everybody was contributing something, whether it was cleaning up the highways or, mucking in with planting bulbs. There was something about what the culture was about. And I don't know what that is over here. And I don't know what that is in North America. I mean, it's very, very difficult to say.
Yeah, I think there's that issue of fragmentation sort of crosses into another subject conversation that I was going to ask you around gender debates and identity. And it feels that separateness that's created through that, the way that debates are more contained and separate is, it's very damaging. I'm not sure we're doing, in this hyper-connected world, I'm not sure we're doing connectivity.
Well, I think it's a paradox, isn't it? That we're both doing connectivity and disconnection because we haven't figured out how to be attached and separate or autonomous, so that we have our identities, but they have links to other identities. I mean, I think it's really interesting because biology is now telling us about fungi, mushrooms, trees, and their interconnections, and how cooperation is critical, and how the natural world seeks connection. Now, I think we know that as people with humanist ethics or endeavors, that people only can exist in relation to others, that people need connection. They need connection where their own identity separateness can be respected, but they can't, not where they're isolated. I mean, that's the Louise Eichenbaum and I, who've written a lot together, have talked about separated attachments. And we meant that in relation to the mother-daughter relationship or in relation to couple relationships. But I think about it much more in terms of, well, how do you have cultures that are both connected and also autonomous? So, how do you have an identity as a European, but also as a country within Europe and then within a province, right? How do you do that so that there is, and there we have lots of models for that, but we seem to think, or not we, but because I don't think we're in that group. A lot of people feel very outside of those models and then are inside these very narrow or silos of interest where exclusion rules rather than inclusion.
Yes. And so that's the project, really, isn't it?
The project is how do we make common cause with people while with respect and letting people challenge who we are, but also challenging, right?
Yes. I'm trying to remember God, back in my academic days, there was some very fabulous academic who said that this century would be that century where we have to work through those issues of how we are different and together at the same time. And so it would seem. Within all of this, kind of the way that things have evolved and this kind of individualism and these very different identities, there seems to be that kind of common prevalence of an insistence on the normative at the same time, you know, the normal body, the
Well, I think
normal.
that's come because it's so damn profitable to make everybody feel like crap about their bodies. And so it was bad enough to make women feel bad about their bodies for a period of time. When I wrote Fifi, I was thinking about that as a short period of time. But I see women in old age hunched over from anorexia. And I see little girls playing to camera at 3 and 4 or playing with cosmetic surgery apps. And I was in the chemist yesterday and there was a man buying some kind of very fancy foundation and moisturizer and stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, wow. So the market gets expanded and expanded and expanded. So we sell body hatred throughout the world. And meanwhile, the industries that both deconstruct our bodies and purport to make us feel better about them, their profits go up and up and up and up and up and up. And, you know, in Europe, the richest people in the world are involved in the beauty industry and the fashion industry. And then they whitewash themselves or art wash themselves by giving sums of money for the restoration of Notre Dame. I mean, it's very, very sweet. Or supporting artists, you know, and yet the intent, you know, if we look at every aspect of the production line around clothing or cosmetics, we know that there's some very nefarious practices that are polluting not just our minds but the whole of our environment. And we've all bought into it. Doesn't matter what country we live in.
And how do we escape this? How do we break this open? How do we create some sort of alternative narrative that has purchase in this?
Well, doing is a lot better than performing. It doesn't mean we're not tainted by it. I think at one level, the doing is what helps. I think the other level is how we raise our kids, how we help new mums not pass on their own body troubles to the next generation. So
I think that's a very powerful entry point.
I don't think it matters where the entry point is. For me, that would be the entry point because you get two for the price of one, so to speak. You know, no mum wants to feel, or no parent wants to feel that they're passing on their body troubles to their next generation or their eating troubles. So interventions there are really critical. We can't do it in England because we don't have any money for the National Health Service anymore, and we can't free up midwives and health visitors to actually have any time with expectant parents. You know, it's really terrible. It's really changed. So that would be one entry point. Another entry point would be to challenge the whole of the curriculum around healthy eating, which, you know, there have been attempts in both Australia and New Zealand to do that, where it's not based on ridiculous ideas like calories in and out and all of that, but about actually include what are bodies and why do we eat and then I think at the sort of curriculum level, I would be looking at teaching economics or science through some of the things that actually do captivate young people now, which is the body.
Yeah.
I might look at, you know, how do you make this cream in chemistry, or what about this curve in, you know, why all of a sudden in China between these years and these years you've got the growth of cosmetic surgery or you've got the growth of lipstick. I mean, there's a way of creating curricula that address it and also bring a kind of consciousness in.
I think that's amazing. I would like to ask you if some of the opportunity is in introducing another generation to you and your thinking. If there were people listening out there thought, oh yeah, I might read a book by her, which of your books would you say, well, read this one then, and why?
You know, I'm really not sure, because I like Bodies a lot, which is a book I wrote and have rewritten.
I thought that might be said, but no.
It's not strident in the way that Fifi was. That is a feminist issue. It's a different kind of an account. I don't know. I think what's really interesting is that books are still very, very cheap. They're ludicrously cheap.
Yeah.
You know, there used to be a lot of money when I was a kid or a student, and now they're just, you know, they're still money, but they're nothing compared to what a theatre ticket or even a movie ticket is. And they give you a lot of a challenge. It depends what piece you're interested in, but I think if it's around issues of development and how we know who we are and how we struggle to have bodies and also be connected, I suppose it would be Bodies.
Okay. Well, that's a good recommendation. I think for part of, you mentioned getting older, and there was somebody who interviewed you and you said, who's going to listen to an old lady? And I think, well, clearly lots of people. But also it's really important to introduce you to them. And to say,
that's kind of funny, isn't it? That's weird. I mean, I was speaking at giving a talk to adolescent psychotherapists and doctors or people who are interested in it, and I learned so much. They learned so much. It was a really interesting, and I wonder if it's because of the generation I come from, that in a one way, even though we were also seduced and tainted by the Thatcher years,
yeah,
and even the New Labour years, of course we were, there was some foundational understanding of what a society is meant to be, which we still hold on to.
Yeah, and the media informs that as well, not just our bodies, but our lives and what we should love and how to think and who we should be, how we should have sex, how we should love.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's no small task. But I think what I found when I met your books, your writing, you all those years ago, is that listening to your voice helps open your head up and you can think about these things. And that's
well,
why
I
I would
think for a
encourage.
writer, anything is a love letter to the reader, isn't it? You think, I've learned these things. How can I say them in a way that is useful to people?
I think that your books do that on repeat, and I would encourage anybody listening to read them all.
Thank you.
But if not all, then just start with one. And actually, we'll organise to do some. We'll organise some books of yours to do some giveaways for people listening and to introduce them to a bit as part of this as well. I think for me, meeting you and having you with Sex in Space, it's about an introduction to our audience to say, meet this person. And
thank you.
Incredible work. Yeah, it's ferocious intelligence, but beautiful writing.
Well, I just think I've been part of a very lucky generation. I mean, it's very painful to see the world in the state it's in. But I think to have come of age after the civil, longing to be part of the civil rights movement as a teenager, and then fighting against the war in Vietnam, and then this thing, women's liberation, and then psychoanalysis, but a kind of progressive version of it, which I got to be part of contributing to. Just so it was lucky.
Yeah, well, it certainly was a time of hope.
Yes, and that is what's so terribly difficult now, is that the despair. It's very hard to find stuff to feel hopeful about.
Yes, but
I'm not living in a country. I'm living in a country of massive decline and terror about what might happen in North America. Well, we've got Gaza going on, and that's just one struggle going on, right? It's not like the only struggle that's going on in the world. You know, neither is Ukraine the only struggle, or the massing of troops, you know, on the Finnish border. That is not okay. I mean, we are living in times of the construction of terror again.
do you ever find yourself, I get this a little bit, but do you ever find yourself looking and thinking, seriously, this is very gendered, what we're watching out there take place with these boys invading and this male perpetuated violence. You know, there's a very gendered shape to this, and it feels like once upon a time we would have been calling that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's very interesting the reluctance that we both might have to be putting it in those terms.
I feel myself increasingly moved to it.
Well, I'm very pleased you do.
Good luck to you. Yeah. Well, why not? Now, look, I'm very conscious that you said 1:45 at the latest, and we do need to leave enough time to loop this at the end. So I will, I mean, just ridiculously brief, but amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been lovely to talk with you.